Well, the Big D is back on Zoom as we relive a special day in both of our lives, the 20-year anniversary of Hurricane Charley hitting Southwest Florida. Before I bring in Jim, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. Yes, it's different. I'm not talking sports, I'm talking hurricanes. Also, check out the Big D podcast for audio listeners, Spotify and Apple. So I've been trying to get this guy for a long time. Join me, world renowned, a guy who's storm chased many of storms all over the world, Jim Edds. So Jim, this is a day that's gonna live in both of our lives forever, right?
Yeah, good afternoon. How you doing? Happy 20th Charlie anniversary. I didn't realize the Charlie storm was a thing among storm chasers. It seems to be quite popular. Very few of us were able to get in it because it was so difficult and the information was hard to come by. But here we are. There's a lot of interest, and I think a lot of people started getting curious, at least in storm chasing, when they saw that Hurricane Charlie video.
Yeah, as many people know, Hurricane Charley hit Captiva, the islands, then Punta Gorda as a Cat 4 hurricane with 150-mile-an-hour winds, ended up hitting Arcadia, Orlando, caused $15 billion of damage, and I think killed 15 people directly. It killed more indirectly after the storm, but Jim ended up covering was in Punta Gorda to see a Cat 4 hurricane make landfall, the first major hurricane that make landfall in Southwest Florida since Hurricane Donna in 1960.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. Yeah, Donna came through the Keys, and there's a place down in Key Colony Beach. They have pictures of Donna when it came through there. So that was a big storm back then for those that are still around that remember that one.
Yeah, funny story. Hurricane Donna and Hurricane Irma both hit the Keys and then Southwest Florida on September 10th.
Right. I was there for Irma. I was in Big Pine Key, and early morning to about 10 o'clock. That's when the show was there, um, and then it swung. It did a right hook, and then it hit. Not to be forgotten, the peninsula of Florida. They got whacked too, and then the rest it went on up. So there's a lot of people that can tell you Irma stories.
Yeah, before Charley hit, how many hurricanes did you chase?
Oh, I quit keeping track. I used to keep track, and then I just got so many. I don't know. I had a big long page on my website from my first storm was a typhoon in Guam back in the 70s. And then we moved stateside in 74. So we had Eloise in 75, and that was just a near miss. And then 79, we had another near miss. That was Hurricane Frederick. And then you have to go to 85, the great storm chasing season of 1985. Elena, Kate, Juan, Gloria. That was but there weren't too many people doing it back then. But if you were filming storms back then, it was a it was a busy year.
Yeah, Elena made like three loops, supposed to hit Tampa, then supposed to hit Pensacola, and ended up hitting what? Biloxi or Gulfport, right?
Right. It was coming. It was at 26, and we were getting Polo was all it drifted towards this right now in Tampa area. Off Cedar Key, it did there. It just sat there, and then it picked up steam, and then we got a second hurricane warning. It's coming. It started at the coast, and then in Biloxi, where the few chasers were chasing, then they saw blue sky eye. I remember these T-shirts they had that said, "I survived Elena twice." A guy drinking a beer and a palm tree bending over, and that was back in those days. T-shirts, but yeah, it was a busy season. And then shoot, 95, you had Opal and Aaron, but I really wasn't chasing. I didn't really get involved in chasing until Jim Leonard kind of talked me into it. I was living in the Big Pine Key and well, first marathon, And he used to come down and see me because I call a friend at Hurricane Center because back in the old days in the 80s, you couldn't get coordinates. And it wasn't online. And so you'd call the Weather Service office and they'd say, well, it's not coming in the Gulf. Call the Hurricane Center. So I call the Hurricane Center and they got tired of me calling. So they would, hey, Todd Kimberling, hey, take this call here. This is pesky guy wanting coordinates. So I got to meet Todd Kimberlin. He was a high school student that volunteered at the Hurricane Center. Marvelous job. I mean, he was later a forecaster there, but he was friends with Jim Leonard, and that was the posse. If you were going to chase storms, you lived in Miami because you go to the Hurricane Center and you get all the good information. That was the only way. And so I knew of Jim Leonard, and we talked, and he contacted me because he wanted to go to Guam back in 1990, and I said, "What do you want to go to Guam for?" You know, my dad was in the military. We were there. Their bases there. He said, "Well, I want to chase typhoons." And I said, "Well, we only got that one. It wasn't that good." He said, "Well, I want to go out there anyway." So he goes out there and he scores Yuri and Omar in 2 years, and then he's chasing Typhoon Alley, and had the best luck. But anyways, 1998 rolls around, and I'm getting tired of the day job, and I'm getting tired of sort of tired of taking pictures for magazines. I just kind of burned out on that. I'd been in quite a few taking underwater pictures and freediving pictures and pictures with alligators in the Everglades. But 1998 rolls around, and Jim Leonard, he bolts down to Puerto Rico. And if you remember, that was Hurricane George, 1998. Very strong, very resilient hurricane. It wasn't a 5, and I don't believe it was a 4, but it was a tough 3 because it went over the mountains and it survived. But he filmed it in Puerto Rico and went right down the center of Puerto Rico. It like did a Maria, and it hit him pretty hard. And he filmed that. It was some of the most amazing footage I've ever seen. And then he got out quickly. He went to Miami where he lived, and he says, "Hey, this thing's coming through Key West. I'm coming down. You want to go down with me?" And I said, "Sure." And so he picked me up, and we spent the night. And early that morning, we took off down to Key West. And he showed me how to park the car, how to stay safe, how to get out of the wind, and basically get over your fear of getting blown away, getting hurt. And I said, "Man, I think I can merge the underwater photography and the top side and get something good out of it." And we got out of it. We drove back. We dodged a lot of debris in the road, and I made a wise decision to turn the AC down all the way. So when the power went out, it was really cold in there. So that was my first hurricane, and I was kind of hooked because once you feel the wind blowing like 100 miles an hour, it's things bending over sideways, the palm trees. It gets a little exciting. But I thought I could make money at it. I thought I could quit the day job and transition to it. So there were two things. It was fun, but I wanted to leave the day job and start my own business. But you just can't do that. You didn't do that back then. You had to see a decent income from the next job before you left. But I'd say after 2004, you had Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and then Gene. So you got 4 blockbusters right there. And then you had 2005, you had Katrina, Rita. You had all these storms. After 2 years, I was set. I had quite the library. So
Yeah.
I quit.
So back to Charlie. That was a weird storm because Charlie was supposed to hit like every storm for the last 103 years. Charlie was supposed to hit Tampa. So the night before Charlie hit, were you in Tampa, I'm guessing?
I was. I spent the night with Mark, and I spent the night with a guy, Dr. Jose Castro. He's a shark expert. We wanted him to identify some sharks that Mark had filmed underwater, and so we stayed there with him. And we thought it was going to hit up there, so that was a good call.
And then that morning, When was the first time you guys learned it's going south? Charlie's going south of Tampa.
Yeah, the 11 o'clock had it going right up Tampa Bay, I believe. And so Mark and I wanted to get to the right of it, which would put us in Sarasota. So we went down there, and I remember filming down there on the beach in Sarasota by a bridge. And we're just kicking around, just taking it easy. Things weren't locked up yet. The water was coming up a little bit, but you get that when there's anything in the Gulf, water comes up a little bit. But it wasn't. And I remember we went to a grocery store around noontime, and we got groceries in Tampa. And I said, this is so strange. Why is this grocery store open and there's a hurricane that's kind of hit, like at 5 o'clock? Um, we couldn't figure that out, but we did notice that any other place but Tampa would have had a lot of things closed. But then a couple hours went by, and we're following the storm on the little Sprint data cards. We're looking at the radar, and it's supposed to come up where we are, but it's not doing that. I think maybe another hour went by, and sure enough, the plane went through it. And I think it was a Cat 3 when it went over Cuba. There's some evidence to indicate that. But it got in the Gulf, and it was a small compact, so it increased quickly. It was decided to do a right hook, and the models were kind of so back then. They're not as good as Ian. And even Ian had problems with the GF skewing the whole track. So let that be a lesson to you. Any right hooks on the West Florida coast, they're trouble. They're trouble. They are so hard to get that right. Even Ian. But anyways, we get word. I think a plane they flew through it, and oh boy, this is a Cat 4. So they worked that up to Hurricane Center, and they put out a special bulletin. And I forget how we found out about it. I guess it was just through the internet connection we had through the Sprint card. And so I said, Mark, this is really strange. We're in the wrong place. We got to go down to Port Charlotte, Punta Gorda area, and maybe even Fort Myers, because it looks like it's turning. And then while we were headed south, it's just Mark. He was in a car behind me. There was an official announcement from the Hurricane Center that it's a Cat 2. It's up 2 more categories. It's not a 2, but it's a 4, and it's coming in sooner. So here's what's going wrong. It's stronger than we'd ever been in. We'd been in a 2. Francis, those were after, but I'd never been anything stronger than a 2, and barely a 1. So I didn't have a lot of experience, and neither did the other guys. We talked tough, but we didn't have the experience. So we bolt south, and I decided to stay on Highway 41 because I wanted to become familiar with the lay of the land. So we started heading south, and we're getting more information. But the big problem is, do we go to Fort Myers? Do we go to Port Charlotte? Where exactly do we go? Because this thing was wobbling all over the place. And I was kind of getting real antsy because you don't have a place. There's no parking garages down there. When we got down there, you got three or four cars. Everybody showed up at this big parking lot, and I'm looking at the radar, and I'm going like, let's wait a couple more images. We did, and then I said, okay, we got to go south, and then I waited another 6 minutes. Another scan came by, and I go, guys, we don't need to go anywhere. Just spread out. It's coming here. I think it was just left, right. I said, I don't know. Jim Leonard was getting some updates from the Hurricane Center. He have a friend that worked there, and he was telling Jim, no, go south. No, come back. Go north. Go south. So he ended up in Port Charlotte. And that's what the pros looking at the radar scan. It was just very erratic. But we were in Punta Gorda. and I said, everybody spread out because I didn't want everybody bunched up shooting the same thing. So Mark and I went to this Bank of America. Jeff went over to the government center, and I think Doug was roaming around and eventually ended up there. They were about a quarter mile away from us, but we couldn't see them. So by then it was time to start filming, and the wind was picking up, the rain was picking up, and Mark and I we were sticking together at first. I filmed him, he filmed me, but two shooters is trouble because you're gonna drift apart, and you, oh, that's a good shot, and I'll go get that. And then Mark found that glorious pub that had cold draft beer, and so he decided to hold up there. I was outside. I was just looking around. I said, well, let me get behind a building. That was the best I could do because the town was evacuated or it was locked up. We didn't see anybody in that town. Now there were people in the pub, the Celtic Ray, but I didn't know about that. I had lost Mark, and I said, well, you're on your own. Just find a place to get out of the wind and then figure it out as you go, which was a mistake. So I got on the side of a eye doctor's office that's looking at 41, and 41 just runs north and south. Initially, the winds were coming over the top of me, so I said, "Oh, that's good," but it didn't end up that way.
Yeah, then when the eye wall came over you, the wind came at you.
Yeah, I knew the wind was going to shift, and my plan only worked if I got the eye, and it was such a small eye. It was like 5 miles across, and that's a pretty tough target if you're storm chasing. With some 10 miles this way, 10 miles that way, it was just really difficult, and it was just sheer luck that I got a piece of the eye. As it was when this thing was ramping up, when it first started up, you'd see sheet metal over the top of my roof, and initially I said, wow, this is going to be good footage. But then it started cranking up and I was out of my comfort zone. But sheet metal comes flying over and it crash into stuff. And every time something crashed into something, it made a big noise. So you were constantly twitching. You were looking left, right. And, is this something coming at me? And that went on the whole storm, and it drove me nuts. I was worried that something was going to get me. There were some plants right there, and there's some soil. And there's these vortices, it's like when a big truck is going down the road, on the side of the road, you see these little twists. Well, that was going on next to me, and dirt was spinning up in my eyes, and had water droplets on my lens. So it was a difficult shooting setup for me. So it was a lot to worry about, but I did the best I could.
What kind of damage did you, what kind of damage did you see? Were there like whole structures coming off, roofs coming off, buildings, windows imploding?
Yeah. What it looked like to me was somebody had a giant shredder up down the road, upwind, and they were just running trailers and houses through it and spitting out everything. And that's what went flying by me. There was a roof that came by. That's probably the peak, the scariest part, where this huge roof it's just like levitating down the road. The sign blew out. It just all at once you had a big gust, and then everything's flying by, and it's just a crazy debris field that if you get in it, you're gonna, like ducks in a shooting gallery, you're gonna get hit, and something small can cut you up, and you're gonna be in a bad way very quickly. But that's what was scary. It was the old building codes, and they hadn't seen a hurricane in a long time, but things weren't put together like they are now down in Punta Gorda. They have new building codes, but back then everything was grandfathered in, and you have to be really careful if you are a storm chaser and you go to a town that hasn't seen a storm. Knock knock, Tampa. You haven't seen a storm in 103 years. You're in for a huge surprise because things are going to come apart. It's going to flood like crazy. Where I live, that's the next big disaster that's going to happen. We seem to miss them all the time. I've been here 4 seasons, and we've had four warnings. but we always seem to miss it. But that luck is going to run out, you know. But yeah, Charlie was a very dangerous storm. A lot of debris. Um, Everything was impacted. What got me was the wind just shredded the whole town. I didn't see a lot of storm surge where I was, but I don't think there was a structure that was unscathed, and most of them lost a roof or severely damaged where you couldn't live in it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the building codes definitely changed because I remember damage after driving around here after Ian, and I didn't really see a lot of structure damage. Of course, there was surge from Ian on Fort Myers Beach everywhere, but I didn't see a lot of structure damage. But in Charley, especially in Captiva, Punta Gorda, if you still have part of your roof left, I would consider you lucky.
Yeah, that the old building codes they were looser, and now they have tightened that up. You can make a house hurricane proof. They they know how to do it. It's just expensive. Um, but back then, I don't know how long it had been since Punta Gorda had seen a hurricane. But like you were saying earlier, it'd been a long time since a lot of the West Coast had seen a hurricane. So I guess Donna, um, I'm not sure. It didn't hit Punta Gorda. If it had, they would have, you know, had to deal with the new building code. But but it seems like these days it's a 4 or 5 or certainly a major hurricane, and we're just since 2017, just one after another. It used to be a while before we saw the Cap fours were kind of rare. You had Hugo, that was a 4, um, and that was a big one. But now they just every year we're getting 4s and 5s. So uh, it's it's quite common. But this place I live in, Tampa, they're going to see it someday, some way. It's going to hit Tarpon Springs, and then it's going to push all that water in the bay. Um, I don't know when it's going to happen, but they are long overdue.
What's with all the major hurricanes we've seen? Because I mean, from 2000, after Wilma hit in 2005 until Harvey in 2017, the U.S. went over a decade without seeing major hurricanes. Now they can't go more than a year without seeing a major hurricane.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I do know that the water temps seem to be warmer and warmer, deeper than ever. But that's just in my short experience as a chaser. Uh, if Whether it's water temps alone, I don't know, but I think it's a contributing factor uh, to they spin up very fast. They get very strong. Like look at Michael in 2018. That's October. Usually in the Panhandle, October, it was if you got one, it was opal. It was weakening coming up, and it was hooking um, opal in October. Let's see what else did they have. That was that was unusual. But to get a 5 in October, that's telling you something. The waters were very warm to support a 5 that time of year. That's unusual. So I think that was the big wake up call for me that there's something going on.
Yeah, well, where were you for? Did you chase Michael when it hit Panama City and Mexico Beach?
I did. I was in. I didn't want to mess. I didn't want to go swimming. I didn't. I knew Mexico Beach. You were going to go swimming if you stayed there, and I've lost enough cars and hurricanes. I don't like doing that. So I played it safe. I worked Panama City Beach, and there were some other guys, some tornado guys, ended up in my parking garage too. And of all the parking garages, there's just like 20 or 30 parking garages down there. I said nobody's going to be in this one. This one's too far away from the center. Nope. but yeah, I was in a condo on the beach, and I didn't see the wave started to build, but the wind blasted offshore and it just knocked them flat. So to the left of the eye, it was just flat. A lot of current, but there were no big waves. Unlike the other side, when you go to the right side where the winds are blowing on shore and all the surge comes up, we didn't get any surge where we were, and we were right on the water. But we did, here again, old construction, roofs were flying off, and it was pretty good. It was pretty good action there. So, but I used to live there, and the house that we had was only a mile down the road. And I often wondered, that's the first thing I did after the storm. I ran down there to see if the old house survived, and it did. It survived. But if it was to the right of the eye, I think it would have had some damage. But it had a metal roof, and metal roofs got a higher wind rating than shingles.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's quite for Michael.
lot better than you called did after Charley, because I remember seeing videos of your back window busted.
Yeah, Mark was parked upwind from me. I was as close to him as possible, thinking, well, he's gonna get it, and I'll hide behind him. There's something floated over in the air and just popped on my the sunroof went. Don't get a car with a sunroof; those are trouble. And the back window went, and it just glass shards all in the car, and so it was a mess. But I ended up driving that car home, that convertible. At that point, I ended up driving it home, and I remember calling Scott McPartland. I said, "Hey, Scott, look on the radar. It's going to be more feeder bands going to hit me because I don't have a roof over my head." And sure enough, it rained on me a few times, and then I got across Alligator Alley, met up with Channel 4, WFOR, gave them the footage, and then I headed south into the Keys. And I don't think I had any running lights. I might have had just headlights, but I had all kinds of electrical problems. Got home about 3 a.m. and turned it off. That car never ran again. So, but I got home, and that was just wild. But I was kind of upset because you take pride in getting in and getting out as a storm chaser. If you lose your ride, then that just creates problems, and like, well, okay, you messed up somehow. But Charley was easy to mess up because there wasn't any safe place in that town. There was nothing safe. In fact, the emergency management team relocated to the airport
Because
because
yeah,
they didn't have the wind rating for the building they were in. And I'm sure they've sorted that out, but I remember talking to the guy that ran that, and he was telling me about it. But even at the airport, it was still difficult for them. They still had problems out there with stuff coming loose. But
yeah, the Charlotte County EOC was rated for 125-mile-an-hour winds, and I believe the guy was Wayne Saladay back in the day. Does that ring a bell to you?
And I can't remember that far anymore, but it could be. It could be. I know he had a story. Everybody in Charley had a story. It was a great story, a harrowing story. And that's another thing about Charley is everybody's got a crazy story about that storm, surviving it.
Yeah. Was there a moment in Charlie where you thought I'm gonna die?
I think so. Um, I knew that if I didn't get the eye, then all that debris was going to be blowing straight at me. And so I packed up everything. I packed up my camera in my backpack, and my tripod was collapsed. And I'm just waiting. I'm just sitting there waiting. And while I'm waiting, the camera's not recording anything. You get a gust, a big, huge surge. It got very bright. But as it got very bright, the winds kicked up another 20 miles an hour. I'd say 15, 20 on top of the crazy that was already blowing through there. And I said, oh, this is it. This is the pearly gates. This is it. And boom, just like that, we popped into the eye. It was that sudden because keep in mind, it's going about 21 miles an hour. It's coming in fast. And the eye came in it was just so abrupt. I've never seen an eye come in as abrupt. And so I saw that, once I realized I wasn't gonna get blown out of there, I ran back to my car. Mark saw the same thing. He left the pub. We both met at our cars at the Bank of America. And he's getting another tape because back then it was mini DV tape. So he's reloading, and I get back there to the car, and I see the window blown out, and I go like, "Oh man, this was a sweet ride." And Mark comes around the corner, and he says, "I remember he's saying it's on," and the big gust of wind came through, and it. I put my head up like, "Mark, what happened?" Big gust of wind hit me, and it blew me back about 25 feet on my face. It just lifted me, and I went backwards and did like a Superman. And then I got back on my feet, and I came up to my car, and he says, "Jim, get out of here. You're going to get killed." And I wasn't really paying attention because I was going like, well, what am I going to do with my car? And and I said, well, where do we go? And he said, just follow me. And so he took off running, and I was going to go, but I looked at my car again, and then I lost him. So I jumped in my car, and I jumped the curb, and I went on the backside, and that curb was about that high. I just jumped it and went on the backside of the Bank of America, and rode out the second half back there, just kind of wondering how I was going to get home. But yeah, it was a mess. If you didn't have chaos, then you weren't in Charlie, because it was very chaotic. I think for everybody that decided to stay there, it was a scary experience. And I know of some other people, and I look at their foot, some other chasers, Mark Suda, that was wild up there on the interstate. Jim Reed, he was nearby. They had the same thing. It was just blowing so hard, so much debris, that nobody had any skill in that kind of environment.
Yeah, definitely a moment we'll never forget. Quickly, why restore? I mean, Charlie, Irma, Ian, all forecast in Tampa. Nothing. Why does Tampa avoid major hurricanes for 103 years?
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why they get lucky. But sooner or later, one's going to come in here, and it's a lot of people, because I tell the locals, I said, look, you get a Katrina surge in here, and it's going to come up. No, we're protected by some event, they're hanging on to something. And I'm here to tell you, if you plot all the hurricanes of the last 100 years, all the way from Brownsville up to the Outer Banks, everybody but Tampa. Go back 104 years, so that we include Tampa. Every place has been hit. Yeah, Mother Nature makes sure. Oh, you haven't gotten one. Okay, yours is coming. Okay, here's one for you. You've gone a while. Here's one for you. You're going to get hit. It's just the numbers are going to get you sooner or later. So you might as well prepare for it, because, like Dr. Bill Gray used to say, he said this before the 2004 season. It's been a long time since the peninsula of Florida has seen a major hurricane. And he said, trouble is on the way. And look what happened. 2004, you get 4 hurricanes in 6 weeks in Florida. I count Ivan as a Pensacola hit, because if you saw that area, you would say the same.
Yeah. So thanks for hopping on, Jim. It's incredible that it's been 20 years. Feels like 20 hours since Charlie hit, and hopefully you'll be storm chasing for the next 20 years.
I'm going to go in for a storm chaser rebuild this week. Yeah, you slow down, but you just try to chase and not so much energy.